fairly miserable night outside, I have to say. A night where we won't be seeing anything of the winter sky, I'm afraid. We'll be seeing something coming from the winter sky, but that's only in the form of precipitation. We've had a very good run of observing from Blackrock over the before Christmas and during the Christmas period. The temperatures were low, the skies were clear, and with astronomer low temperatures and clear skies, it's definitely not a bad thing. The atmosphere is inclined to be more stable, which means you can get better observations when it's cold or after a lot of rain. But we didn't have much rain until actually today. I think today is pretty much the first example of rain that we've had in quite a while. My name is Niall Smith. I'm going to give a brief enough presentation tonight about the winter sky, which I hope you'll find interesting. I'm going to try to take it from a slightly different angle, maybe, than one might imagine. I'll go through a number of objects which are visible, but it's really difficult, I think, unless you're observing, to talk a lot about individual objects, because you can easily enough do that by going on the net, and the ideal place is outside, and instead we can't do that tonight. So I've tried to take a slightly different angle on it, and sure, let's see how it goes, I guess. So I was going to kickstart, actually I was going to set this going, I'm going to do it now anyway. One of the things that we don't get to see in this country at all, really, are these. This will actually now play for me, and then and I'll just leave this to its own thing for about 2 minutes long. Many of you will recognise those at least as the Northern Lights. We don't get to see very much of the Northern Lights from these latitudes. We do on the odd occasion. One of the reasons I wanted to show that to you wasn't to put you asleep, because it is the sort of thing that if you are in a darkened room and you relax back, it's very cathartic. But it's the vibrant colours And if we look at the Northern Lights and ask what it is that is actually happening there, well, many of you will know, I think, that the sun emits light, but it also emits particles which travel, take a few days to get from the sun to the earth, and as they collide with molecules, air molecules, or at least molecules in the atmosphere, they give up some of the energy as they come to a crashing halt as they hit the molecules in the atmosphere. And that causes those molecules or those atoms to glow. And when you saw the bright green there, they were oxygen. And of course, a lot of our atmosphere is composed of oxygen. So green would be something that we would see very much in the Northern Lights as the oxygen molecules stop these particles that come from the sun. That's important to us because we now, as a civilization or as a species, have a lot of satellites in space. And these satellites are themselves affected by those same particles. And indeed, an enormous growth area. If we have any budding entrepreneurs in the audience, and anybody with some innovative ideas, one thing that's going to become increasingly important in the future is protecting our satellites from these charged particles that are emitted by the sun. In the winter sky, the sky that is above us at the moment, as I say, from these latitudes we generally don't get to see the Northern Lights. But there are a lot of things that we can look out for. And at the beginning of this talk, I'm going to go through a few of the things that I find interesting. I do say that I find interesting because it is really difficult, of course, to choose ones that everybody likes. So this here is an example of the winter sky, and some of you may be able to pick out a group of stars. Anybody know what that constellation is? The Big Dipper, or the Plough, or the Great Bear. And that's one reason why I wanted just to show this particular slide was that from Ireland, this is visible all year round. Every night of the year, weather permitting, you can see the Big Dipper. And one of the things that's nice about it is these two stars here point to what's just hidden in behind the tree, the North Star, or Polaris. So in times past, decisions were made to put the stars into groupings. And just so as we're clear, there are 88 of these groupings, and we all know that these are called constellations. And the names that we use for these in the Northern Hemisphere come from the Greeks. Now we have actually anglicised some of those, like for example the Big Dipper is Ursa Major, and Ursa Major is originally from the Greek, got translated into Latin, but Ursa Major is the Great Bear. And in the southern sky, what's interesting is the names that we use were ones that were developed more in modern times. Now, the Aborigines have their own names for the southern sky constellations, but we actually don't use those particular terms. So what has happened is Greek mythology has been transferred to the southern sky, so that we have Greek constellations and Greek mythology all over the sky we look above us. Some parts of the larger constellations, like the Big Dipper, are what we call asterisms. These are parts of a constellation. So a lot of the time what we actually look at when we look at the sky really are asterisms. And I'll show you one or two more examples of that in just a moment. The stars in a constellation are named mostly not by a name that we can recognize, but by the Greek letters. So, for example, the brightest star in a constellation is given the designation Alpha, the second is Beta, and so on. There's two stars that are really quite interesting. We'll come back to those in a moment. Betelgeuse, and Rigel. Betelgeuse and Rigel would both be visible tonight if it was clear, and we would have been outside afterwards and had a look at them. And what's interesting about them is that Betelgeuse is at the end of its life. It's an enormous star which is so large that if you put it where the Earth is or where the Sun is, we would be inside it, and it's very red, and it's quite cool. Whereas the star Rigel is a relatively young star, which is 40,000 times brighter than the Sun. So if you put it where the Sun is, well, you can guess, we talk about global warming and a 1 degree rise. You can imagine if you put a star 40,000 times brighter than the Sun where the Sun is, what that would do for the planet here. So in fact, even in this constellation, which we'll show in a moment, and some of you may know the constellation of Orion to see, we already have two stars which are at opposite ends of their life cycle, and in fact we have a wonderful location to look at stars which are just being born. So Orion is a perfect constellation to look for stars which haven't really yet been born, into stars which are young, into stars which are old stars. Betelgeuse is large and red, and that's because it's old. But for many of us, we know that there are constellations of the zodiac, and most of us will probably know what star sign we were born under, and in a couple of slides time I'm going to explain to you why you are born under a particular star sign. But essentially the Sun appears in different parts of the sky during the year, and the constellations that it blocks out as it moves around the sky are the constellations of the zodiac. The Sun